For more than 40 years, scientists have been in this incredible, high-stakes fight with one of the smartest adversaries you can imagine, the HIV virus. It's a battle that's been full of amazing breakthroughs and some really tough setbacks. But a totally revolutionary new strategy has just come to light, and it's one that actually turns the virus's own greatest strengths against it. All right, let's get into it.
I mean, this is it. This is the big question that has been at the heart of HIV research since day one. This virus is just a master of disguise. It's constantly mutating, constantly evolving to get around our best defenses. So how in the world do you hit a target that's always on the move?
And make no mistake, this has been a long, long war. Just look at this timeline. The very first drug got approved way back in 1987. That was the first little glimmer of hope. Then, a dozen years later, in '99, scientists found a brand new vulnerability. But notice that huge gap. It took another quarter of a century of just relentless work to turn that discovery into the breakthrough drug we're talking about today. It's really a story about incredible persistence.
Okay, so to really get why this new approach is such a game changer, you have to understand the enemy. And the one thing that defines HIV is its unbelievable ability to fight back against anything we throw at it.
And that brings us to the core problem, drug resistance. You know, that first drug, Zidovudine, it felt like a miracle at the time. It worked, but only for a little while. See, HIV is kind of a sloppy copier. When it makes copies of itself, it makes a lot of mistakes. And every now and then, one of those mistakes accidentally makes it immune to a drug. And pretty soon, those resistant viruses take over, and the medicine just stops working.
So researchers had this brilliant idea. Instead of playing this endless game of whack-a-mole with the parts of the virus that are always changing, what if they went after the parts that can't change? The absolutely essential, must-keep parts of the virus. Because see, a mutation there wouldn't create a supervirus, it would just create a dead one.
And this huge strategic shift led them to focus on a part of the virus that had been pretty much overlooked before, its protective armor.
So this is the Capsid. You can think of it like a perfectly built suit of armor that protects all of HIV's most important genetic material. Back in 1999, a study came out that showed not only how this armor was built, but also that it was, get this, surprisingly fragile. Most changes to the capsid protein didn't just dent the armor. No, they shattered it completely, making the virus totally harmless. And boom! That discovery led to a really exciting question. What if, instead of trying to poison the virus from the inside, you could just crack its shield? For years, this idea seemed incredible, but it also felt like a total dead end. But here's the thing about science. Persistence is key. And what came next was a journey that lasted 2 decades, and it ended with them turning a massive, show-stopping problem into a truly revolutionary solution.
Now, this slide right here represents so much frustration. For years, researchers came up with molecules that could latch onto the capsid and break it, but they all had the exact same fatal flaw. They were basically as soluble as sand. I mean, for a drug to work as a pill, it has to be able to dissolve in your body. This one problem was so big that the entire idea, the whole project, was almost scrapped completely.
And this is the light bulb moment. After all those years trying to fix the drug's poor solubility, the scientists just flipped the question on its head. What if the problem wasn't a problem at all? What if it was actually the solution? They realized that because it doesn't dissolve well, they could inject it right under the skin, where it would form this tiny little depot, slowly releasing the drug for months. The drug's greatest weakness literally became its greatest strength.
So what were the results of this wild new approach? Just absolutely incredible. The drug, which is called Lenacapavir, showed 100% effectiveness at preventing HIV infection in trials. 100%! A single shot, twice a year, that's perfectly effective. It is really hard to overstate what a massive deal this is.
And look, don't just take my word for it. Science magazine called this breakthrough, and I quote, the next best thing to an HIV vaccine. This isn't just some small improvement. It's a complete paradigm shift in how we can think about preventing and treating HIV. Of course, anyone who's studied HIV for more than 5 minutes is going to ask the exact same question. What about resistance? The virus always finds a way, right? Well, yes, but this time there's a really interesting twist. You have to remember the iron rule of fighting HIV. You never, ever go after it with just one drug. The virus is just too good at adapting. You've got to hit it with a combination of drugs from different angles to keep it down.
And yep, sure enough, when they tested lenacapavir for treatment, resistance did pop up. But, and this is key, it only happened in cases where the drug was pretty much fighting alone, without the backup of other fully active drugs. When it was used in a proper combination therapy, it worked perfectly, which just reinforces that #1 rule.
But this is where it gets really cool. The researchers took a close look at those resistant viruses, and what they found was wild. To actually resist the drug, the virus had to mutate its own capsid, its essential suit of armor. And that mutation came at a huge price. The resistant virus was basically crippled, barely able to replicate at 30% of its normal speed, sometimes even less.
In other words, HIV won what's called a Pyrrhic victory. Yes, sure, it survived the drug, but it had to fundamentally break itself to do it. It won the battle, but in the process, it might have just lost the war for its own survival. It's a win that's so bad it's pretty much a loss.
So what does this all mean for the future? I mean, this whole decades-long journey has taught us some really powerful lessons that go way beyond just this one drug.
The big takeaways here are pretty clear. First, we know that going after the capsid is an incredibly effective strategy. Second, forcing a virus into a corner where it has to choose between drug resistance and its own ability to function, that's just a brilliant tactic. It's also proved that stubborn, long-term scientific work really does pay off. And maybe the most exciting part? This whole idea of targeting the protective shell could be a blueprint for fighting all kinds of other viruses too.
And that really brings us to our final thought. The story of this drug is just a masterclass in changing your perspective. A problem, poor solubility, that held up research for 20 years, it wasn't a roadblock at all. It was the solution, just hidden in plain sight. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other huge challenges that we're banging our heads against today are actually solutions that we just haven't looked at from the right angle yet?